Good afternoon, my name is Ashley White and I'm doing a presentation on Chapter 11, Effective Learning Environments. Topic number 2, how is applied behavior analysis used to manage more serious behavior problems? I'm sorry if it's going to be a little bit difficult to see. Up first, what is applied behavior analysis? It is the application of behavioral learning principles in order to understand and change behavior. Behaviors that are reinforced are going to become more frequent, and behaviors that are punished will become less frequent. How is student behavior maintained? In order to understand and change behavior, we must first look at the ways that we are reinforcing this behavior. There's usually 3 categories that this falls under. First is teacher attention, then peer attention, and then release from an unpleasant state or activity. We're going to look at teacher attention first. Students might misbehave in order to get adult attention, even if it's negative. And this is a more common reason for misbehavior than teachers realize. So what's the solution? Pay attention to the students when they are doing well and reinforce those behaviors, but ignore them when they misbehave because you are only reinforcing them acting out if you pay attention. Second is peer attention. Do not ignore them because it will only reinforce the behavior. If they're acting out in order to get their peers to laugh, if you pay attention to them, then it means that they're doing it right. Scolding them might also cause problems because then they can resent you and make comments in class, and then the peers will, contribute to that. Try using simple reminders of what is expected, such as standing close by them so they're aware of your presence and that they should get back on track to what they're doing. This really becomes a problem for middle school and high school level because peers become more important than adults in that time frame. Okay, there we go. Thirdly, release from an unpleasant state or an activity. Boredom, frustration, fatigue, unpleasant activities, all of these things cause them to misbehave or act up. Allowing them to escape from the classroom will only reinforce the behavior, and it's often counterproductive. If you're bored and you want to get out of class to go to the restroom to get water, if the teacher lets you go every time, you're going to act up the same every single time. What's the solution? The solution is prevention. Provide interesting, varied, and engaging lessons in order to keep them engaged, keep them involved, so that way their minds aren't wandering and they don't want to leave the classroom. Up next, we have principles of applied behavior analysis. This is going to be the 6 steps of applying these principles of what do you do. So first of all, you're going to modify their behaviors. What is behavior modification? Behavior modification is a systematic application of antecedents, which are rules, and consequences to change behavior. One example that a few students around here know of is PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. The first step is to identify the target behaviors and the reinforcers that you're going to use. Observing and identifying their behaviors will help you establish a baseline. If it's a serious problem, if it's frequent, and if it's easily observed, these are the best to change. It's easy to get them in the routine of changing the behavior. If it's something that doesn't happen very often, it only occurs once a month, they're not going to make the connections of what's expected when you reinforce it. Figure out which one is reinforcing it, if it's your attention, if it's peer attention, or if it's that they're bored, because it'll affect the way that you apply these rules. The second step is to establish a baseline. If you define the behavior specifically, it'll help you realize when you're supposed to reinforce it. Instead of saying, oh, they're bothering their classmates, you should say something along the lines of, they're teasing another student, or they're interrupting when someone else is speaking. That way you know exactly what behavior you're targeting. It's not a wide range, it's something very specific. And then keep track of how often it occurs. The third step is to choose a reinforcer and the criteria for reinforcement. Typical reinforcers include praise, privileges, or tangible rewards. If verbal praise is not enough, then you should provide other concrete and visible signs. For middle school and younger, you can do smiley faces or stickers, something that lets them see that they're being rewarded instead of just a smile. because they might not remember that. It's something they can bring home and show their parents. So it's positive for a long term. The fourth step is to choose a punisher and criteria for punishment. Be careful, because even if it helps solve the problem, it could cause other problems. If the student starts to resent you, that's going to make them act out even more if they don't want to listen. Depriving them of privileges is a last resort. It's not a first resort. This is something that you try to give them as many opportunities to receive positive reinforcement. Timeouts for younger students are effective, but they should not be used frequently. Here are some more principles for effective and humane punishment, because it's very important to understand when punishment is appropriate. Punishment should be used sparingly. It does have side effects on the kids. If they're being punished all the time, it's going to affect their schoolwork. If you tell them why they're being punished, they're less likely to think that you hate them. They're not going to use it against you. It's going to make them understand what they have done to receive the punishment. I mentioned earlier you should always provide alternate ways for them to receive positive reinforcement, and that's because it allows them to choose if they want to sort of conform to what you want in order to receive a reward, or to keep misbehaving and receive a punishment instead. If you're punishing them for a particular behavior, make sure that you are reinforcing the opposite behavior. If they keep getting out of their seat, for instance, you might want to praise them for staying in their seat. Call attention to when they're doing good, so that way it doesn't feel to them like they're always being punished. Never ever use physical punishment. That is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Do not punish them when you're angry or emotional, because it often causes the punishment to be a little bit harsher than you intended. And then punish them when the behavior starts, not when it ends. It'll help them make connections in their mind of what they should and should not be doing immediately. This is the fifth step. It's to observe behavior during the program implementation and to compare to the baseline. So this time you're going to keep track of the number of times the behavior is occurring, and then if it's succeeding, if you've decreased the misbehavior, then you'll continue on to the next step. If it's not, you may want to step back and revise your plan, maybe define the behavior a little bit more specifically, or try a different reinforcer. The final step is when the program is finished, or when you realize it's really successful, you're going to start fading back on the number of times that you reinforce the behavior. Initially, the behavior is reinforced each time. Then you go down to every other time, and then every few times. It helps maintain the behavior over an extended amount of time, but it's allowing the student to realize that they have to behave this way, not because they get rewarded, but because it's what's right. Next, we have applied behavior analysis programs. The first of these is home-based reinforcement strategies. Behavior modification strategies in which a student's school behavior is reported to the parents, who then give them rewards. These rewards are often more important to the students. It could be getting to go to a friend's house that weekend, or eat at a particular restaurant. The parents have a deeper connection with the child, and they can provide reinforcements that as a teacher you can't. It also is more good news, because most students who misbehave often, the parents only hear about them when they're doing bad. So when they're acting well in class, it gives more good news at home, and often it encourages the student to act better. You send daily reports at first, and you sort of fade in the same way. You go to weekly, then bi-weekly, and then eventually you end up with just sending report cards. This ties along with it the daily report cards. It's a rating of behavior at the end of each day, so they can get a star, they can get a happy face, a sad face. If the student meets the set goals and behaviors, they're rewarded either at home or at school. It often dramatically reduces behavior problems. One study that I researched was by Vanest and others, and it said that 61% on average effectiveness, which means that 61% of students had a reduce in the behavior problems. I did include that the range was from negative 15%, which I'm not clear on, to 97% effectiveness. They did comment on it, saying that the wide range of scores highlights the need to consider specific aspects of implementation to improve outcomes. So that means that they used a blanket approach, so they used the same approach for every student instead of an individualized approach. Basically what it means is that for students that it doesn't succeed with, you should find an alternate route, because maybe the parents at home aren't participating very well. Maybe the students aren't returning the reports to their home to be rewarded. And so you really have to take it on an individual need basis. But overall, 61% effectiveness. That means that over half the time it works. Just keep that in mind for your future classrooms. Finally, we have group contingency programs, which is when rewards or punishments are applied to the whole class for adhering or violating the rules. Often teachers will say, we'll go to lunch as soon as everyone is done with their work and sitting quietly. It's easy because it's an all or none approach with rewards, and it often requires positive peer pressure. So students will say, hey, sit down. They're encouraging their students and their peers and friends to sort of adhere to the rules to help you in a way. It's having them help you to achieve the behaviors that you're looking for. Are group contingency plans effective? This is one study done by Thorne and her colleague, and they studied 4 different classrooms. In these 4 classrooms, all of them improved in student behavior. There was 12 participants, and all but one showed a decrease in misbehavior. The ethics of behavioral methods. There are a few problems and there are a few critics of using applied behavior analysis. The biggest question is it over control of students. Do we focus so much on controlling every little aspect of their behavior that we lose focus on teaching and on learning? What the book said was, school is for learning, not social control. Quality of instruction and student engagement needs to be the main focus. Misbehavior that is affecting either one of these is what should be addressed. If it's a minor misbehavior that maybe they're clicking their pen, that you shouldn't interrupt class to deal with behaviors like that. Another main question that they have is it bribing? The book disagrees and says that it's not, and that it is a systematic application of rewards. You're not doing this to bribe the students. You're almost doing this to train them, to help them understand the behaviors. But the book warns against over-applying these methods. You don't want to control them to where they become little zombies who are just waiting for a reward. This is my works cited, the textbook, and then the 2 articles on the research. Thank you very much.